This is the Dog Psychology Podcast with Linn, Todd Langston, and Art Ortiz.
Today, on this episode, we're going to be talking about origins, how each of us got our start in dog psychology. Everybody has a start and how they got started, or a mentor they mentored with. And today, we're going to do storytelling about how each of us got our start. Linn, how about we start with you?
Sure, why not? Yeah, how much are we doing? You just tell me if I tell too much. How about that?
No, it's all good. I think the more, well, maybe I should say the more because I know how long you can talk. But I think just all the meaty details.
Okay. Well, I was training dogs, and I was tired of doing the obedience thing, and I actually started, I guess, what would be the first outpatient board and train. Because I would, instead of going over weekly, because I got tired of people, on third week. All right, show me what you did. Well, I couldn't remember, so we just didn't do anything. So, it's just ridiculous. So I just started going over every day until Friday, and then meet the client on Friday, and then they had the homework to do the weekend. It was pretty cool. It turns out it's what people do now anyway. So it's called magic at your place, right?
Yes.
Sort of. So a client that I had, Rottweiler, and very aggressive to other dogs. And I worked with that dog for 5 weeks. I mean, every day for 5 weeks. And I just couldn't get it past this thing. And I've got this scar. I call it the Caesar scar. Elvis was the name of the Rottweiler. And they actually used Elvis for the pitch show for Dog Whisperer. It was the very first
Really?
episode you never saw. It was just to pass around the studios to see who would take it, and so it was pretty cool. But anyway, when this dog, the last day, the prong collar I had, never get one of those easy prong collars. Those just do the work and put it on, because when this West Island Terrier, this lady wouldn't stay away. I kept saying, "Go away, go away." She kept coming, and I grabbed the prong, and I guess I hit the release, and it was so slow motion. Clink, 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 clink. Everything came off. The Rottweiler went. I jumped. I hit the curb. Anyway, blood everywhere. I went back to the lady. And I said, "It looks like I'm not going to be able to achieve what we've been talking about, what we've hoped for." And she said, "You're going to quit, are you?" "No, I'm not going to quit. I'm just saying we're not going to get there." And that part of the story will shrink it up. I was a big fish in a small pond at Barrington Dog Park in LA. And that's where I was doing my dog parking before I started training. And it's like my office. Did a lot of consultations there later on too. And
I've been to that dog park.
Yeah, right. It was before I was there before they actually had it fenced in, right? And this one lady, she was in scrubs, and this is my pond at this time. I was pretty cocky about things, and she was talking about this guy, and she says he's a dog whisperer. I'm like, "Oh, great! That sounds like a pretty good name for a business, like the Horse Whisperer. He's going to make all kinds of money. Great." She kept talking about him, I was just getting upset. How could you talk about somebody better than me? Because I kept everybody safe at the park. It was a whole thing. And she was wearing scrubs because she was working at the VA, and she didn't even have a dog with her. She was just on her break. And the day after I told my client that I wasn't going to be able to help her, I said, "I heard about this guy. Maybe we'll go check him out." So I went back to the dog park and couldn't find her. It took me 3 weeks to stake the park out, specific times, to run into this lady again, and finally did. And then she goes, "Oh, I got to look for the number." Another 2 weeks, right? Finally, we got the number and made the appointment. And I told my client, "Hey, when we get there, don't tell him I'm a trainer. Tell him I'm your dog walker." Because I'd already run into a whole bunch of problems when I was trying to learn how to work with dogs by asking dog trainers, "Hey, can I follow you around?" Or big foreshadowing of my shadow program, right? Nobody wanted to do it. They all said the same thing. Like they went to a conference. Well, I don't breed competition. Turns out that's what I did, and I've bred a lot of competition. But that's okay. There's plenty of dogs. It's just a funny way of going about it. But so we got there, and at Caesar's Place in South Central, and opened up the big gate. And he, just like the very first season, you saw he bring in the dogs. Now, he didn't get Elvis in there off leash. Elvis was pretty hardcore. However, he did get him in there with 50 dogs, and I was just blown away. I'm blown away. I was like, this is what I've been looking for. You know how I'm not technology inclined.
Yes, we know.
But this was back in the day when the computers were, wide, not the screen, the back. And it was like green, like want to play a war game, really creepy. I'm trying to find behavior. And every time I found something that looked like it was going to be it, they were calling, something that they did, sit, stay, come, heel, as a behavior. And that's not behavior. It's not a behavior. It's a condition. Oh, goodness. Kitty cat came in.
Wrecked my puzzle.
Oh, well.
Oh, man.
And it doesn't even know. It's like, hey, what's going on here?
For those of you guys are listening and not watching the live video, what just happened? Todd just jumped on his table where he was doing a puzzle.
How many pieces to the puzzle?
So I had just gotten started and was doing the outside edge, and it was all of that.
Well, I mean,
it was like half of the outside edge. It's on the ground now.
Well, begin again. Learn, practice, master, begin again.
Perfect.
So, he got the dog in there, and I was just blown away, like I said. And then Caesar started talking about what he wanted to do, and I won't go into all of that, but he did show me some other stuff.
Did he want to open up a coffee shop?
No, he wanted to write a book and have a TV show and all that stuff. And me, I was kind of embedded in all that. And we won't get into that stuff right now. But what he did after, because we stayed and talked, he doesn't do it anywhere. The education I got was amazing compared to what he does for everybody now, which is really cool. But back then, I got to see the stuff that he pointed down the middle of this pack of dogs, and he went like this, and right down that line, that half went over there, and then he went to the other. They went all over there. I mean, doing all the. This is the first time seeing it. How anybody who watched The Dog Whisperer for the first time, being able to see the stuff that I was able to see way back before he had a show, just incredible. But I said, this is where I'm supposed to be. And I said, when can I come back? And then that began my stalking stages for Caesar. It was pretty crazy, but that's where I got in there. That's how I got in. Actually, I wasn't in fully yet. That's where I met him. And, without telling, I don't think that this is too private. His wife at the time, was telling him, that guy's going to steal everything from you and don't let him over. So it was a big thing. I showed up every day. I basically lost my business to sit outside his place on a daily basis. Sometimes I would never see him come in or out. So he must have already been there, or my timing was poor. Sometimes he'd come and I'd get out of the van and he goes, what are you doing here? Get out of here. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then sometimes he go, what are you doing here? Come on in. And I'm like, ah. And I just did it over and over and over and over again, to the point where, I guess I grew on him, and then it all evolved from there. And it was crazy.
Over how much time?
I think that the first 6 months to a year. And then after that, he got the show. And then in the middle of there, about, I don't know, after the first season, I just happened to be there that day. And Gail, his assistant, said, they're saying you can't do any more consultations or rehabilitations other than for the show. And he had a year waiting list, right, of people that would Could you imagine back then, 2000, 2001, something like that, having a year waiting list? And he said, like the sky is blue, start referring to Linn. Ooh. And that's where my real education began, because that's where I really found out about aggression, and they're hardcore cases. But the way I learned from Caesar, and this is always fun. Did you see that? No. And walk away. And it might be 2 weeks before I saw him again. I went on hikes with him and his pack, with my pack. Crazy scenes back then. Before cameras were on phones, man. If you wanted pictures, you had to bring a camera. If you wanted a video, you had one of those big things way back then. But he had his 25. I had my 10 or 12. I mean, it was insane going through Mulholland, the canyon up there. But then 2 weeks later, I'd come in and did you see that? I'm like, no. He'd walk away, and I'm like, what the heck? Me, pattern guy, recalling how if I heard stomping and then I heard talking to grinding teeth, I already knew that the ring was being turned around, and the next thing was my head and my hair, and I dragged all around. So I just started looking for the pattern. And whenever I'd start seeing him look that way, I didn't know. I seriously didn't know what he saw. He goes, did you see that? And I go, I did, but I'm not sure what I saw. Oh, well, I'm like, why didn't you just tell me that in the beginning to watch whatever you're watching? But, at that time, I mean, he told me, I don't know how to teach you, I have no idea how to teach you. And
was he teaching other people?
No. No. I mean, I think he had just started going to Sherry Lucas up there at Templeton. She has that rescue with all that ranch, and so she had just started doing basically the same thing. But I lived there, so I got to see him a lot, and he obviously loved going up to Templeton, so he went up there a lot. So, and she had the camera. She took pictures like no other. I have this one picture that she took of me and Caesar and his client at the Mulholland Canyon trail. And I'm all angry because she's saying, get in there. And I'm like, I don't want to. It's disrespectful. Get in there, Linn. And you could see I'm like this, and my foot's off this way, and my dogs are there. But she took that picture, sent it to me in a frame. It was pretty nice of her to do that. I only have one other picture that I ever asked to take with him, but now selfies are the thing, and I missed out on all that. But at any rate, he did not teach. One time he asked me, this is funny, am I not a good teacher, Linn? And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm sitting there thinking about the knowledge he has that he's forgotten about that we need. And I'm like, you're crazy. This is amazing. Why would you ask me if you're not a good teacher? And he goes, you keep coming back. I'm like, what? Wow. He really is somebody who doesn't, at that time especially, didn't understand that we can't understand what he instinctually does. Yeah. Right. So you can't teach instincts. But so I just learned by watching. I got to go to, and there's a lot of things that I learned personally, aside from dog psychology during that time. But right after that, when I was, that year waiting list, I was doing 4 consultations a day. And you know how much I talk? A day. I was doing them every single day, 7 days a week. I had a 3 or 4 month waiting list on top of what they were sending me. So I was doing those consultations every day and then getting on the phone. I mean, it was insane, and an experience that I relish. It's just a wild time, and yeah, pretty crazy.
What was the most dogs you ever had?
That I owned, or
no, that you had, like that you were had to deal with at any one time
before I had my first facility?
What I guess that would be, once you got the facility, because now this is where I come into play, because this is right at your point here.
After,
right?
I think I had the facility for almost a year before before you came, I think. It still was an empty building with no doors or shower.
You were putting fencing up. You know, you were doing fencing and stuff like that. There was nothing else up. I mean, it was still super primitive.
Poured money into a building that wasn't mine. One of the things well, at that time, between when you were there and there was a time where I had like 50 dogs. And, you know, at that time I had crates stacked on top of crates on top of crates.
I remember.
I had acres. I had an acre of cement. Before I did that, it was the stupidest thing I ever did was to open a facility. You know, I had started my shadow program, and I in my mind, I thought no one's going to take me seriously unless I have a facility like Caesar does. And at that time, I didn't know he was, you know, paying next to nothing, if not nothing, to be in that 2.5 acres, because he was keeping the whole area safe for that guy who owned the area by walking around with the dogs and keeping the thieves out. But here I am, and that place was $18,000 a month. That I obviously, after a year and a half, almost 2 years, I was homeless for a few months in the van. So it still had 14 client dogs in the van. So rehabilitation.
I remember.
Yeah.
This is when, so that is where I come into the picture during that whole process, or during that whole time of
just prior to me getting
Well, I also spent time with you and that's where I met Colleen, is when you were living in a van down by the river.
Right.
You know?
By the river.
You know, you were doing it for Brentwood, right? It was in Brentwood.
I was living in the dog park parking lot that was so familiar to me. And nearly every night, because it was the hottest summer ever in LA. And so I had to have the doors, the side doors and the back doors and the front doors open and the AC on, trying to get any kind of airflow through there. And every night while I'm sleeping, cops would show up. We heard about, I'm like, are they charging and trying to kill you right now? No, they're all in the van. They're trying to sleep just like I am. There's other vans here. Why don't you knock on their doors? You know, people, there's a guy down there with a bunch of dogs. You know, it's crazy. It is a nightly thing. But before that, the stupidest mistake I made before getting the facility, I don't finish that. Yeah, I did not need that facility to be believed that I could do what I'm doing. I was the most financially secure I'd ever been in my entire life before I got that facility. And I've never caught back up to that. I mean, I had $50,000 in the bank. I had 2 vehicles. I had no debt whatsoever. And 7 days a week, 4 consultations a day, 4 students at a time. Stupid. I got that building. But you live and you learn. Before that, though, Caesar talked about, you got to have a pack. Got to have a pack. Have to have a pack. And so, because it was generally 2 or 3 weeks in between me seeing him, I went to the pound, and I got 7 more dogs all at once. And that was always a big joke. Linn is coming. I wonder what finger is missing, because I was constantly being bitten. And he goes, why are you getting bit so much? I go, well, you told me I needed a pack. What do you mean? Well, I went and got 7 more dogs. What? No. You rehabilitate the one dog. You get another dog. That dog helps you rehabilitate that dog. Those 2 dogs. But you didn't tell me that. You said, get a pack. And I haven't seen you in 3 weeks. So I went and got a pack. Man, crazy times. Crazy times. But I did it. And I probably have more skill than I need. You know, I mean, nobody wants to purchase the level of skill that I have available. They all want it in 5 days or less. And it's just going, just sitting there rotting, I guess. But I would never trade how I learned dog psychology and the mistakes that I made to get there, the homes, everything, the bites, I would never change it. I would never trade it. And you guys had considerable access to Caesar. And at this point, he's learned how to teach. He's actually teaching specific things. He's got it all worked out. but I will never trade it. It's like I have instincts as well, and ours kind of were like bumping off of each other until I got it, and then boom, it was there. Obviously I have tons of stories, but those are just a few. I wonder what finger is missing. Linn is coming today. But yes, that's then for 3 years, everything that was called into the DPC, was sent to me, and then they finally, it just turned off that phone. But yeah, that's how I got into dog psychology. Getting into dogs is a whole different story. But yeah, yeah.
Well, Todd, let's transition into Todd, because this is where this is kind of a nice good flow, because where you ended, not where you ended, but where you're in your story about where you're in the van and stuff like that. Todd comes in at this time.
Yeah, so 2006, 2007, my wife and I were in Seal Beach, which is just south of LA, and we get a German Shepherd puppy. Now, at the time, I'm working in a restaurant, and I'm in the process of trying to start my own business, a consulting business for restaurants, because the teaching was kind of a natural, and I just was going to teach what I knew, which was working in restaurants. I had done that, for years and years at that point. And so when we got this dog, we weren't supposed to have a dog in an apartment. And, we kept her hidden and didn't socialize her. It was a German Shepherd. We didn't socialize her. And so really, really early on,
beautiful,
we ended up with issues. Yeah, she was. And we ended up with real strong issues from her, with aggression. And at the time, I contacted Caesar's Place. So according to, as Lynn's saying here, and they told me this, they go, Caesar's not taking any new clients, but if you want somebody, we will refer you these 3 people. So at the time, it was you, Sherry Lucas, and it could have been Brian Agnew that they were referring.
No, not at that time. He was my first student, but no, he wasn't.
Okay, so then it was you, Sherry
name,
Lucas.
I think it was Cindy.
Okay, so there was 3. I remember getting 3 people. And the funny thing is, the reason that we chose you is you were the most expensive. And at the time, I think it was $300 or something like this, is what I think it was. So we're 2007. And we get an appointment and we go down there, and you talked. I remember walking in. So here's what I remember. So I walk in, and Brian is the one who lets us in.
Brian.
So it's like in the past, it's like of what's now, it's like a who's who. So Brian Agnew lets us in, and we come in, and when we walk in, you have 3 or 4 students. Heather Beck is there.
Yeah.
For when I walk in as well.
And Heather came in at the same time.
And you had all these crates on the wall, and all these dogs were barking. And we walk in and sit down, and then you walk in and you got your hat sideways and your glasses and all this shit. And you fucking walk in. I'm like, is it this guy? And you go, and all the dogs stop. And I'm like, holy shit. Because, the only thing we knew about it was watching The Dog Whisperer at this time. So his show had just, been out a season or so. And we talk with you for a bit, and you give us a Halti. And this is funny. It'll be interesting to see how you remember this. And you give us a Halti. So I put a Halti on our dog, and I think she's 10 months old. And at the time, she had not liked anyone. She had not accepted anyone other than my wife and myself and one friend of mine. And you walked her away from us, and you knelt down, and she licked you in the face. And I was like, holy shit. Then you dropped the leash, and she walked over between Jen and I. And you talked to us for a moment again, and I don't know what the whole dynamic here was, but you walk over, and what I remember is you reach down to pick up the leash, and she launches up, and she goes up towards you. And in my mind, what I see is this move here. And my dog just goes sideways and then goes, boom, smacks the ground. Like I all this is still like visual, or it's as I recall it. And I'm like, oh, fuck. And then you take her and you walk her away and you kneel down again, and she licks you in the face again. And I'm stunned. And I look to the people that are standing there, the students, and I go, oh, you guys must see this all the time. And they're like, no, man, we've never seen anything like this before. And I'm like, oh shit. Well, that was the moment. It was that moment that I went, this is what I'm going to do. And so I ended up applying, and oddly enough, one of the people that was there ended up coming back when I was a student with you. And I remember him telling me, he goes, when you left, he goes, Linn looked at us and goes, that guy will be back. And I don't know if that's true or not, but I remember, I think it was a British dude, if I remember right. But
yeah. That guy was
okay. So he came back when I was a student, and he told me that. He said that when I'd left, you had said something like that, and so that was the beginning of it. So my introduction into this whole thing was as a client. And then when I came back, as I did that story on Instagram, my first introduction with you was you coming out and immediately bolting back inside and dealing with a pack fight. And then and this other student going with you up to the vet's office to deal with the dogs that got hurt in the fight. And that other student ended up dropping out.
No, she didn't drop out. This is, I was wondering if you remembered. Kendra was my girlfriend at the time. She was in there with the dogs all by herself. And I was going out to get something, I think a client or something. And she called me and I could hear the dogs and I was already on my way. And I'm sitting there looking at that new student just kind of, and I went in and broke up the fight. But let's get to the student. After about a week, I said, you're deaf, aren't you?
Yep, I remember that.
And she wouldn't accept it, I'm saying this is 2006 or 7. They've got some hearing aids that aren't like, speakers. You'll be fine. And she wouldn't accept it or go to a doctor. And I said, you know what? You're out. And I kicked her out. Gave her all her money back at almost a week and a half of time. And to be honest with you, that girl, about 6 months later, she reached back out to me and said, it really sucked. It hurt what you did. You kicked me out of doing something that was my dream, but I've never felt better in my entire life. I got a hearing aid and I can't believe that I can hear what I've been missing. And she says the best thing that's ever happened to her. And I'll give her that. That was pretty cool. She did that. But anyway, that's when I kicked her out. And then I said, hey, you want to do this?
So I remember being there. So then I ended up with you solo style. So the program was 30 days. And there were so many aspects to it that if could be repeated are, I think, the fundamental building blocks to creating somebody that can do this, right? From the not being able to talk to the fishing that you would do. Do you remember the fishing?
Well, I think Art told me. I don't remember.
I brought this up to Linn one time. He didn't remember what it was. Maybe you can explain what that is, Todd.
I remember what I think we were doing. I just don't remember why I called it fishing. Was it when I was teaching the dogs?
Because you considered them salmon.
Yeah.
And what you would do is you would get them moving in one direction, and then you would stop them and you get them all moving in another direction. So the physical aspects of pressure and space were really visual. And one of the other things, and this is still to me really funny to this day, is that for those who aren't watching or who don't know, you and I are about as physically similar as two people could be. I mean, the way that we move, the way we put our feet on the ground. And so during this whole process, one of the things that I did, and I'm good at this anyways, but what I did is I said, I'm just going to be a mimic. I'm going to be I'm going to like match you. I'm going to mimic your movements. I'm going to mimic the way you do things. I'm going to mimic the way you do all this stuff. Even though I don't even understand what I'm doing, I'm going to mimic it. It was so easy for me to do. And from that, I was able to really build a skill set of it, because where I'm really naturally able to do this is I can see change really easy. So if I could do these things, I could see what worked and what didn't. Even when I didn't understand what I was doing, I was a great parrot.
Yes.
And that's something I still see with a lot of trainers to this day. Yeah, I get the parroting part. Some people don't move out of the parrot. They just take the words. They don't understand the depth of what they're doing.
Right. They got a lot of likes, so they keep doing it.
Yeah, and that was something that I think was really helpful for me, was that similarity. But there were so many things. And then I remember I still have the notebooks.
Do you remember what I called that process? I think I even mentioned you should do that. I called it memorize, internalize, and become. I don't care if you copy every single word I use. At some point, it will shift to your own, every action, everything. And then
well, you still had the learn, practice, master, reinvent thing. And so it made sense for that, because I wrote down, I still have them, all these like analogies that you would say and all these things that I would see in the appointments. And there's a huge benefit in a different way from watching people give appointments. Like I have a student coming tomorrow for 3 days, and we have appointments set up. And what I really impose on them is I want you to see the things you don't want to do. I want you to watch this appointment from both sides. I want you to see the things that you're not aware that you need to do, and that these are things that are, wow, I didn't know this was possible. But I also want you to recognize there's going to be things that you don't agree with. There's going to be parts of my style and parts of the way that I approach this that aren't you, that you're not going to agree with, and I want you to honor that part too. And so the benefit of watching from the sideline, because you actually pointed this out in some videos and stuff that we had to submit to you, was what you get to see. And I remember you pointed out real early on in a video of me and a guy kind of having a clash in an appointment. He goes, "Are you watching the dog?" He goes, "The dog's waiting to see who wins." And so it was always about you were always about point of view.
Yep.
And that was one of the things, and it still resonates. It's still very, it makes a lot of sense today. So the whole process. And then from there, I went and did, you were very emphatic about, we had to spend time with a rescue. And I mean, that was also a great part of the formula, is you weren't going to go from here and you need to go touch as many dogs as you can. Like, you've got to get touches on dogs, as many as conceivably possible. And it's funny you mentioned the whole Caesar thing, because you're like, you don't need a pack. You don't need a pack. But of course that I went out and I grabbed up as many dogs as I could, but that's why you learn so much.
Right.
And so that's part of the process too, is you bring all these uncompatible dogs in and you make them compatible, and you start to realize how that whole thing works. And so then from there, I went out and spent 2 more weeks with you. And that's where I met Colleen. We were doing an e-collar. You had just went and worked with Martin, and we were doing an e-collar program at the park right there in Brentwood. And that's when you were living in the van.
Yes.
So between the time that I went and did the shadow program with you, the 4 weeks, and then that time there had been some changes. You'd gotten I think there might even been another. No, the other facility was later.
Now my
and so then
at my vet right there in Brentwood.
Right. Yep.
She gave me
and that's what
floor.
So that was the transition of that and learning the e-collar and stuff. So from there, I just worked and filled my house full of dogs and filled my house full of issues. And, as all of us that have done that, you learn how to make that work. And I think without that, I don't think it's possible to actually be a good teacher of this. I don't think, unless you have embraced and immersed yourself in other people's problems, like over and over again, time and time again, and had to bring all these different elements together, are you really truly ready to go out and teach somebody how to do it?
Exactly.
And that's just the client, much less the teaching others how to teach.
That's a whole different animal, learning the client.
That's a whole different one, and it's getting so diluted. I mean, that's a whole other podcast, but you have to get to a certain point of absolute knowledge before what you're saying is certain. And I know that to be true. So I can only imagine what some of these people are going through.
That's why in the early days when I could do my thing, I broke you guys down. Broke you down to nothing.
Big time.
And nothing. I had
every day the homework.
Yes.
Like why are you doing this? What's your motivation behind that feeling? Why do you need to be this? Why do you need to act this way?
Love that.
And
I wish that I thought about it, because I have your homework still. I wish I'd thought about it and brought the homework here. Well, maybe we'll do that.
You should get pictures of that, like you share it on Instagram, like little snapshots of it.
We'll be careful.
You guys have that stuff.
Yeah, no, I don't want anybody having the info, but yes, it's pretty cool. I still have that homework. Everybody's homework. I still have everybody's homework. But the process that I was putting everybody through was similar to my mistakes in the Marine Corps, which I lived on my own, so I could walk almost, And so why would I go in the Marine Corps? So in boot camp, I didn't know that they were there to break you down, to build you up into a Marine. I just resisted everything, and I was good at everything that I did, so they couldn't fail me out or anything. I called them on every day. You told us to do this. We did this. And now you're telling us that we didn't do what you said. The whole point was they're just supposed to follow orders. And whether they're right or wrong, you're supposed to follow orders. And so I learned how to break everybody down.
But you were also vulnerable. One of the lessons were your vulnerability of what you've been through.
Well, that's the thing. In order to get the student to feel comfortable to talk about their worst fears, I talked about mine. Anything that I had you guys do, I proved or showed you that I'm willing to do the same thing. I'm not trying to be some sort of Hitler. There's a reason why I'm doing all this. And, you were, and I tell anybody when it comes up that you were my favorite student. Meaning,
why?
Well, the way I got to teach and the way because right when I kicked that girl out, I said, hey, you want to see the stuff that I do when the students aren't here before you arrive? Because you guys are there 12 and 15 hours. I'm up 2 and 3 hours before you arrive, and I'm still working after you leave. One of the impressive things about Todd was at that time, I think he lived in Huntington Beach, and that's a 45-minute drive. So 15-hour days. He'd drive 45 minutes, still have to do the homework.
2 hours each way.
Still have to do the homework, which if you didn't do the homework, you get in big trouble with me. You had to do the homework. It's all part of it. It's for your record. It's your journal. He still has it from 2006-07. He still has it. That's how important of a time.
I couldn't do it again. I definitely, that was a perfect time. I was the perfect age. I was perfectly fit. In the perfect mindset to just flip over. And I remember saying this, I'm going to flip over and surrender. There's nothing I know. So there's nothing for me to say.
You did not you did not resist. So we got to progress. Everybody still wins, whether they resist or not. Once the resistance ends, your education begins.
I knew that was coming.
You don't lose the education because you resisted for 25 days and you got 5 days left. As soon as they surrender, it's all downloaded. You didn't lose that information. It's just the resistance. And that's why I need resistance from the student. I need resistance from the client. I absolutely want the dog to tell me how they believe the world works. And that's a form of resistance so that we can then bond, maybe even through adversity, and then move forward together. A lot of people did not understand what I was doing. But
your intentional exposure of people is not always received as what it is.
But now everybody wants it, and I'm too old to put that much time in. You used to say, "Oh, how are you doing this?" Well, it caught up to me. I melted, and I guess it was 2000 into 13 when Canyon died. It caught me and I melted. And I haven't been the same since. But was I a vampire or something? I don't know. But I enjoyed that time until it was gone. It was really good. So yeah, you were my favorite because you didn't resist. And I was able to do the things that I don't do in front of the students. And like the fishing, put 20 dogs into a small area. You start working them, you become one pretty quick.
Yep. Lots of lessons. How do you fit into this, Art? So where do you come in?
Well, I mean, the way where he just ended about Canyon 2013. So that was when I started a pack walking business in downtown Dallas, and I'd been doing it for a year. And I had a client of mine who said, "Hey, I see Caesar's having this workshop at his dog psychology center. You should go." And I'm like, "Oh, that's kind of cool, right?" And so I looked at the price, and this is when I had lost my job. I was almost homeless. I didn't have any money. I was going through divorce. I had my 3 dogs, and I just didn't know, what I was going to do. And so I didn't have very much money. Then I saw the price for training Caesar's Way, and I was like, $6,000. I don't even have $60. Like, how do you expect me to pay for this? And so my client, her name's Janet. She's like, "How about we have a fundraiser for you and we raise the money?" And I'm like,
that's a pretty cool client.
yeah, so I said, all right, well, she's like, I'll start with $100 or something like that. And so we did like at the time it was called crowdsource or something. It was like what GoFundMe is, but it was like the very first one. Um, and so I raised half the money. And at the time, I didn't have a lot of money, but I had really good credit at the time. So I took out a loan for the remaining amount. And I also found some of my friends to kind of walk the dogs while I was at the course. And so I worked that out. And so I went out there to Caesar's Dog Psychology Center. And that's when I met Colleen. And, we've already mentioned Colleen, but Colleen, uh, she was a student of Linn as well. And Todd, you'd said you'd met her at Lynn's place. And so I did
That meeting with her ties me back into Caesar, by the
I
way.
know.
From that, I
And
get
there's
looped
a
back.
story I'm going to share with you that I haven't told you yet, but it's because of where I was at the time with Colleen, because your name came up and Lynn's name came up, and I'll share that here shortly. And so I go to TCW, and me and Colleen just click, and we just click, like we just have like a really good friendship from the very get go. And so she asked me after, on the last day, she's like, "Hey, would you should consider come to California and I'll mentor you." And I don't know why she offered that for free, by the way. And my first thought was, well, I can't, 'cause I don't have any money. What am I going to do for money? So she's like, well, just think about it. If you want to come back, you would. And at the time, she was doing the classes at the Dog Psychology Center. And she's like, you can work. We can come to the Dog Psychology Center. We can, you can be like my assistant, and you can just learn. You just absorb it all. And so it was, she wasn't going to pay me, obviously, and I didn't have to pay her. And so I went back home, told my friends what the opportunity was, and I was like, I can't go. I don't have any money. And they were like, dude, you have to go. Like, how long? How long is it? I'm like, as long as I want it to be, but maybe 6 weeks. And so my friend's like, dude, you got to go. We'll take care of everything for you down here. You just go to California. So I loaded up my CRV with my three little dogs, Emma, Hero, and Frankie, and I took a tent with me because I didn't know if I was going to have to sleep on Venice Beach, because I had no idea where I was going to stay. But I would just had this faith, this leap of faith that I'm just going to go out there. I'm just going to go. And so ended up driving all the way out there, and I just did one shot, from Dallas all the way to Venice Beach. And so I get there, and Colleen's like, dude, you could stay here. I mean, you could stay on my couch, you could, no problem, whatever. And so I got to stay at her house, sleep on her couch, but I did make her breakfast, really runny eggs.
That aspect of her has always fascinated me, by the way. Her ability to just be so relaxed and cool with any living situation presented to her. I don't want you motherfuckers staying with me.
No.
Yeah.
And, since day one, I was like, nobody sleeps in my room. And she's always been like, no, come on
I
in.
know.
She's very social
Fantastic.
that way.
I've got so much she's such a good human being.
Yeah, totally agree. And so I got to spend 6 weeks with her, and we would go up to the Dog Psychology Center like twice, like Tuesdays and Thursdays, I think it was. And then there was an opportunity where at the time, I can't remember her name, who used to work there. Anyways, she's like, "Hey, we need some help. Do you want to help us out here?" And I'm like, "With what?" And she's like, "Well, we need to wrangle some dogs and kind of get them out and stuff like that. And Caesar will be here, all some stuff." And I was like, "Of course, I want to be around Caesar. I just took TCW. I got to see how amazing it was." And so I started to, hang out there at the DPC. I got to stay there. And but what I did do is, what a lot of people don't know, is I was there to water the plants. I picked up poop. I did all the stuff that, not, I wouldn't say nobody would want to do, but I did the little things because I just wanted to be there. I didn't care what it took for me to be there. I just wanted to be there and absorb all that stuff. And then at the end of the day, because, Colleen would teach in the morning, she would drive back to Venice Beach, do some appointments, and she would come back, and then she would pick me up because she had a class at night. She had two classes, one in the morning, one at night. And to think about it, how she would drive from Venice to Santa Clarita twice a day is mind-boggling to me, because we would leave, because there was a class at 8 a.m. I think we would leave like almost 5 a.m. Like, we would leave super early in the morning just to make sure we could beat traffic, just so they could be there by 8 a.m. Which, like Todd, you were talking about, like, you can't do that anymore. There's no way I could have done that now.
Back in the day, we didn't care. We had all the time in the world with drive.
So, I got to spend, 6 weeks with Colleen, and, she also had like a pack walking business at the time too. And so when she had all her dogs, like I would, the dog she was training, and she trusted me enough to walk all the dogs. I would walk all the dogs, and so I think Todd and I, and anybody that goes to TCW, one of the things that we look at from somebody is how they handle dogs. Their leash skills
Right.
is a good quality to have. And anybody who's listening, if there's one skill you want to pick up, is learn how to use the leash. Because if you're sloppy with the leash, you're sloppy with everything. If you're good with the leash, you're good with everything. And so, I mean, Todd, like when we have like trainers that come in and they're just sloppy with the leash, and they're considering themselves dog trainers, and we just kind of look at each other like, the leash work tells a lot of the story, And so that's kind of one thing that I always believed that I was really strong in, is the leash handling and stuff like that. And so, Colleen would trust me enough to go take the dogs out, the pack. And so, I was there for 6 weeks, and I got to spend so much time at the DPC. And during this time, because I got to spend a lot of time in the car, a lot of drive time, I remember that we were on a phone. Colleen had called Heather Beck, because at the time Heather Beck was also there as a trainer at the DPC when we were doing TCW. And she called her we're driving in Colleen's Prius, and she calls Heather, and we mentioned going to go see Linn. Like, where's Linn at? Where I've been trying to get a hold of Linn. I can't go hold of Linn. And Linn, you just said that, and that was 2013. So that's right around the time Canyon had passed away. So I
Yeah.
remember Colleen telling me like, "Oh, we've got to go see Linn. You've got to go see Linn. You got to meet Linn. You got to, do all this stuff." And so I just kept hearing about Linn this, Linn that. We've got to go. Where's his facility? Where is he at? What is he doing? And that was a lot of the conversation. And then during the same time, Todd, is when they were trying to make like a new like TV show about like the Survivor, but of dog trainers or something like that.
I never knew what the fundamental was, but I knew they wanted a man and a woman.
Yeah. So, but there was like a TV show. There was going to be um, like Survivor, like almost like how he has the one in Asia, that show in Asia, but I think there's gonna be one here in the U.S. And so
Okay.
Colleen was giving names of like dog trainers to, at the time, Caesar's manager, and your name came up, Todd. And I remember thinking, sitting there in the car, and saying, why is Colleen not considering me? And I got really like inside, I got really upset, because I'm like, why is she not considering me? Why is she not considering me? Well, because I wasn't ready yet. Like I had just been working with dogs for a year, like, you know what I mean? But I remember being really upset. And I've never really shared that with anybody, but because I thought I'm ready. Like, I'm spending day and night with your dogs, like literally sleeping 4 hours a day. I wake up in the middle of the night if I hear a dog get up, and in your crates and stuff. I make you breakfast. And so that is how like I got introduced to, all of this. And then that was a summer of 2013. So I spent most of the summer in Venice Beach. And then they had another TCW in December of that same year. And so I got to go back as a volunteer. And so I went back. I went, it was me and Steve. Who else was there? I think it was just me and Steve. Me and Steve would just go, and we would sleep. And talking about how Colleen, do you remember how we'd all pack up in her hotel room? Like
Yep.
she would have like the suite, and I would be, on the couch. Steve would be on the floor, or we'd roll in like all these roll out beds, or whatever they're called. And so we would all just pile into her hotel room. And, again, those are some like great moments that we had. But, Lynn's name kept coming up for, during that time as well. And I think I finally met Linn in 2014 or 15, around there. And we all flew in for TCW. Todd, you were there too. And I remember Colleen had just started dating Dave, her husband now. And remember, he was like he made tacos and stuff, like, invited everyone. Tammy was there. Steve, I think Yoa might have been there. And that's when Linn shows up. And I remember thinking, who the hell is this guy? Like, and I told this story too. I was like, he's just way too much for me. His energy is way too much for me. And I remember like he was talking about, oh, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And then Steve and Yo were like, we're ready. Like we're ready to do, whatever you want us to do. And like, we'll sign up. We want to learn from you, this and that. And I remember I was like, I'm not ready. Like, I don't want anything to do with Linn. And for a long time, I resisted Linn. And then I remember he had gone to TCW. And I remember you kind of just, again, rubbed me the wrong way. the very first get go, and I was just like, I don't know what this guy's issue is, you know. But there was something that I think he said to me that has still resonated with me. He said something like, I remember we were sitting in the back. Remember the tent, Linn? We were sitting in the very back, and we were sitting on the ice chest or something like that. And then something had happened on the side over here. And I just remember you say, no, 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 don't. And I can't remember exactly what it was, but anyway, this just had a point. And then you said something to me like, don't ever do that or something like that. And again, I don't remember what it was. I wish I didn't remember what it was, but
I remember the situation, but I don't remember what it was that they.
yeah, I don't either. I don't know what it was either. And you just said,
I remember that shit a lot though. Don't you ever.
Oh yeah.
And
Don't
so,
ever.
you know, I remember, and then you said something like, why do you let people walk all over you or something like that? And I was like, I don't. And then
interrupt you. You see what I did there?
Yeah. And so Linn kind of took it upon himself to call me on the phone, and like I would be telling stories, then he would interrupt, and then I would just stop and listen. And then he was like, why you let me interrupt you? Like, don't let people interrupt you. So he was always like prepping me to
behavior expectation drill.
Exactly. And so you're always like prepping me to, you know, just be confident what you're going to say and do all these things, you know. And so I remember, I think we talked on the phone, and you know, when you talk to Linn on the phone, it's never just a 5-minute conversation. It's probably an hour at least, you know. And we just had a long conversation. And then I remember you'd gone another time. You'd gone to the ranch when we were out there for TCW, and you'd worked with Bobby's dog. Remember Bobby and Regina? And then I remember Bobby just like crying because of how you connected with Regina. And it was something about the crate, like something in her anxiety in the crate or something like that.
Anxiety all the time. Whenever she was away from him, 2 feet away from him.
Yeah. And then I remember him just crying and just seeing some of the stuff that I saw, and I was like, holy cow, like that was pretty cool, right? And then I tried to, I don't know if we tried to get you here in Dallas, and something happened where in the new house you were in, got like there was mold or something like that, and we had to cancel that event. And then it was 2018. It's, you know, this has already been 3 to 4 years that I've been talking to Linn, and never really went to like a workshop or anything. And so Ian Grant had Linn over for his workshop, and that's where I met Linn. And I remember going out there and saying, I know that I'm not going to enjoy this. Like I'm just going to go because I just kind of want to see, but I just know I'm not going to enjoy myself. And Linn, do you remember there was a guy from Alaska that was there in that class? Tim was his name. I think his name was Tim. And I remember in the first day, and I have this recorded, by the way. I don't think you know that, but I have this recorded on a voice thing. And you're leaning into this guy, and then I'm like defending this guy. Do you remember? I'm like, Linn, this is what he's saying. And then you're like, no, but he's not listening to what I'm saying. And like it's going back and forth. And I'm like, God, Linn is such an asshole. This guy, like, just answer his question. And I would say that, like, I'll send it to you, Linn. And I said, just answer his question. And you're like, I am answering his question, but he's not listening. Right. And he's so mad. And I'm like, God, he's such an asshole. This guy's such an asshole. And then we got to start the workshop where you're actually like working. You were doing that.
Let's make that not sound so much like an asshole. I had a point there, you know.
I understand. I didn't know that's the way.
His mind.
I know that
now. We were in Vermont, and then I'm like, where are you right now in your mind? Because I'd tell stuff, and you start thinking about what you do in whatever state you're in. I'm like, you can't be in Texas right now. We're in Vermont. Yeah.
I didn't realize it then, but it was like towards the end when I saw the value in it, which I am actually very thankful for. And so I remember that conversation. And then you did that behavior expectation drill with the dogs going out the gate, how you would go out the gate and you're like, oh, okay, we'll go back over here. And you go back out and you do it again until the dogs were just like, you didn't say a word. And you just, the way you moved with the dogs, all of a sudden the dogs were just kind of like, just sitting there, like, and then you open up the gate and they're just sitting there. And then you ask like Ian, like, which one should we send out first? And I'm like, okay. And then you start sending them out. But it was just like how they were triggered by the sound of the gate, and they would all run to the gate. And then how you just change that sound, how they perceive that sound to create something
Dot,
different,
dot.
dot to dot, right? And so I remember thinking, wow, that was really cool. And then I remember I think I texted Colleen that night and I said, I really didn't want to like this, but I love this. Like it was really cool what the stuff that you did. Even now, like some of the stuff, I mean, I'll share here in a few minutes, but I remember that was like, I called my wife too. And I said, we have to have Linn come to the house. Like we just have to have him come over here and like, just help us out, things like that. And so then, that I came home and I think you'd also, my wife had been, we had a dog that we had named Rusty, I think this dog name was. It was a foster dog that we were working with. And it was a just really bad separation anxiety. And I remember Anne had sent you some videos of Rusty. And I remember that you just responded with like one word, which is, or not one word, one phrase. You said, he doesn't feel like he's part of the pack. And I shit you not, like we started, not that we didn't include him because he was, but the way we started to include him, because, when we like feed our dogs, we put him away. We just made him part of the pack. And then he was just like, oh, I get it. And so it was that one instance where, you just gave us like one phrase. And I remember Anne saying, he just had make him part of the pack. I'm like, what does that mean? She's like, I don't know. Let's figure it out, And so we kind of started to figure out. Then, I mean, that I learned, through Colleen, the dog psychology. There was one thing that I learned. And if you remember on the show, when she did Rock in a Hard Place.
I don't tell people that yet.
Well, it's on the show. It's on the show. Okay. She did that one. She did that one thing, right? And then I started to kind of like, maybe I could do it, but I wasn't really doing it me personally. I just started like experimenting with what that was. And so, and it was like one of those things that I just always did. But then I saw you do it, and then I saw how you would reduce some things and add more. And then I really started to do it in person or see you in person. But I think when I'm trying to remember, I mean, I know you worked with Romeo, was one of the serious dogs that I didn't really want to work with. I remember I called you, I was like, hey, like, I don't want
to. I got that. You got to be there, videotape the first day. That dog was crazy. The dog was bigger than me,
Oh, it's huge. Actually, I think I showed Linn. I mean, I think I showed Todd like the video of this dog. And this dog was a Anatolian Shepherd. This dog was huge. And when I first met this dog, this was probably one of the first dogs that actually scared the shit out of me. Like the minute I felt that fear, I was like, yeah, I'm not doing it. I'm not messing with this dog.
No need to work with anything that you don't feel comfortable with.
And I will say that's the first time, not the first time, but like one of the most serious dogs that I said, yeah, because most of the time I can connect with the dog. I worked with this dog named Bessie, this Mastiff that we connected really well. She was like super confident. But Romeo was serious. Like he was literally jumping up to go after the neck and stuff like that.
I mean, close calls on that, but within a short period of time, he's saying thanks.
No, that same day, that was really cool. And then he was like leaning up on you, and you were walking with him, and it was mind blowing. Like, and anybody, like, I know a lot of people say that have worked with you, Linn, like some of the stuff that they see was just like mind blowing. Like, but not only that, Linn, I think some of the things that when it comes to like dog psychology is like, you talk about your 10 rules to live by. I see them everywhere now. And you used to tell me, you would text me all the time. And this is the education that I would get, because I remember telling Linn, I know Todd is your favorite, but I told you, I want to be your best student.
He was my favorite student training, the way we worked. He's not my
And then I remember I told you, I want to be your best student. And then you said, well, if that's the case, then you're going to have to do all these things, So he would always send me video, and he goes, what rules are being applied and what rules are being broken? And I was like, oh man. So I would kind of like text him, and he was like, okay, well, no, you're wrong. And this is because my big gripe with him is like, if they're followed, how can they also be broken? I was so confused by that. And so he would just like send me videos and analyze them. Or you would even, there was one that it was recently, Linn, where you sent me a video of that lion that you posted. And you said, what pressures are, I'm not going to go into the detail about it, but you said, what pressures are being applied right now? And I was like,
to break that down further for you, we never got the chance to do that because I think I left you confused. You weren't wrong. I don't think I ever said you're wrong. You're not wrong, but these other things occur. But that's a great video. I actually still have it in my file. It says Art's Pressure, that I still want to break it down with you and show you. Uh, the confusing part of the 10 rules to live by is that it's easy to see the rules everywhere being broken. And once you got too excited with that, that's when I said, okay, now that's their natural habitat. Those people don't even know the rules exist, yet they're breaking the rule. You can see it. Start looking for the rules being followed in the natural habitat with people that don't know the rule exists. That's the big step. And then the final step, the mastery part, is being able to utilize the rules to your benefit to create things to happen. If that's a rule and if it's broken, these are the consequences. What can I do to get this person to break that rule? Because their consequence is going to benefit me. Same thing with the dogs. But it is fun at first to look at the rules being broken everywhere. That you can see it. They're plain as day everywhere. But
Yeah.
what I was trying to do with the line was to show you the calculus side of it, where they blend and link and feed off of each other and transition. And then it's really, anyway, we'll get back to.
But that all stuff was so good. But I mean, and just being around, being around at working for Caesar for the past 10 years and seeing the stuff, how he uses Rio and how he just comes up with this crazy stuff, and like, I think like amongst all the trainers, like myself and Todd and Steve, we're sitting back there, and I think Todd does this too. I'm always figuring out, what is Caesar going to do? What am I going to be on point with what he's about to do? And most of the time I'm right, but sometimes I'm way off, like completely. Like, where did he come up with, this thing, or where did he see that? And it's because he's already experienced so much stuff. He's been there. He's seen that.
That's a great way to learn, though, by saying,
Yeah.
what's he going to do this time? And if one of you were ever correct, I bet you walked around all day long with your peacock tails out, and everybody said, "Yeah, you got it," because it's he does have an endless supply of MacGyver type ways he does things with the dogs. And if you're guessing, you're trying to figure out which one or something he's going to do, that's only going to enhance your ability to work with a dog, because you're thinking and processing and seeing what sticks and what will work and what won't work. A lot of people, they just get into one or two things and they do it for everything. And, I like French fries and cheesecake, but I'm not going to eat it every fucking day. You know what I'm saying? It's not healthy.
Yeah. But I think, like Todd, I mean, there's some stuff that we've brought home, some of the stuff that we've seen Caesar do, some of the stuff that, I mean, of course we don't have Rio, but just that opportunity to be around that and just learn. And sometimes we'll go back to the hotel room and we just like not laugh, but like, holy shit, that was amazing. I mean, we just kind of like, and we'll kind of analyze it and talk about it. I think, me and Todd, I think that last TCW that, I don't know if, of course, maybe I'm the only one thinks this, but Todd, the last TCW, you and I started really talking a lot, just about just things, but how the brain works. So, we talk about Andrew Huberman and stuff like that. Just all these things. We had some really good conversations. And I think the reason why is because Steve and Yo are also not in the car. So, those two take up a lot of the conversation. And so, and we kind of like just, do you see when Cedar did this? And do you see when, oh man, that was so cool. Like all these things that we've had access to and get paid to do it, So we're getting an education while getting paid to do it.
It's been priceless. I mean, it's not even possible to put into words the amount of knowledge and things that have been seen or witnessed or observed.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting to quantify the physical time spent, watching and observing. And yeah, at this point, it all blends into itself. But that's part of the team about that, which I don't feel too connected to too many groups, but that team of trainers and the team in general is the most closely connected I feel to anything. And so he's done a really good job, or we've done a really good job, or whoever has, of creating that up there with the trainers. And so if it wasn't for that, I'd be interesting to know where I would be in life and career. I mean, so many things are better because of that. So much personal growth, all these different growths I could attribute to that. Just the accountability of saying, okay, I work in this situation. I want to be better because of the situation.
Live
And
to improve.
that you have to, right? If you're not living to improve, it's what are you doing?
Right.
And that's a huge thing. It's funny you say that. I've lived by that. And, if you're not trying to get better, if you're not trying to, and whatever it is, better your diet, better your health, better your physical body, better your ability to do different things, learn new skills. But getting better is important.
Totally agree.
Yep. One of the things that's, like I said, Todd was, as far as students go, I've got a lot of great students. My time with Todd was what was my favorite. We got to do things that I didn't do with any other student. Todd is great. He's actually a definition. Maybe a definition is not the right word, but yeah, you don't have to. You can, if you understand dogs, you can go anywhere in the world to do it. And he built a very successful business in Orange County, California, and when his wife got pregnant, he's going to move back to where he grew up so that his kid could grow up in a nice place and family oriented. I think the rest of your family was there, and he got lucky that the name of the place he grew up was Orange County, Florida. But he had a successful business, and it's very difficult. A lot of dog trainers they can't grow because they can't say no. They can't say no to clients. They build the business before they understand what they're doing. And then when they find out how they could learn something new and that they need, they can't say no to the clients, which is crazy, right? But you packed up a full business and left it there and went and started another one from the ground up.
Yeah, a lot of lessons came from that.
So, you don't
But it was built on that premise of you got to go, it's a whole other episode, but it's who you get to know when you get there, right? The rescues and so forth will be your allies. Now they work against you at some point, but to help build a business, they're definitely an ally. Mm-hmm. So yeah,
I think Todd also, when I got my start with Colleen, and you'd mentioned this about having a bunch of dogs at your house. I mean, I remember in one weekend I had like 32 dogs at a time, and managing the whole pack. Managing all the dogs together, and honestly, I was so comfortable. Like I loved being there. It's all I wanted to do. Now things have changed because I don't want dogs in my house and other than my own.
Yeah.
And I think everyone has kind of grown to that point as well. But I'm so thankful for those nights. I'd wake up super early in the morning, like 4:30 in the morning. Get up and get them out and walk the dogs, bring them back, get them fed. And I used to tell myself, "Oh, you've always wanted to farm with animals. Well, this is how this is how I always try to stay like loving what I was doing." And so I just remember just having dogs and the way I had it set up and just being out there in my backyard with the turf and Lynn's been in my house, in my old house, and just being immersed. And that was where I got my education as well. And I was so thankful that I never really had any serious scuffles. I mean, we had things here and there, but I knew how to handle it. I knew how to diffuse it. I knew how to follow through with it at the end, which is so important. And those are the things that I learned from, being around Colleen and even, and Caesar and Linn, things like that. So all that stuff was education that I got to do in being immersed in it. Like, I think like a lot of times, again, I'm not talking crap about the new trainers, things like that, but there's not a lot of people who have been immersed in those things, having 20 plus dogs at a time, you know what I mean? And now we do it differently.
Well, they do.
Not enough.
They hurt the dogs, and then we find out about them in the news. It's just people trying to do stuff too soon. I mean, that's basically what we did, but they're doing it in a different way because they have access. We never had access. Well, maybe you did it, Art. No access to seeing other trainers doing anything. No Instagram, nothing back in the day. Now it's everybody's trying to look and keep up with the other successful people. Instead, everybody's just talking head now. Nobody's doing any work with dogs, and it's a bubble and it'll eventually pop. But the dogs cost. I don't want to talk crap either, but there's some work that could be done in the dog training industry.
This is a whole other podcast.
Well, that's actually our next episode is how to get started in dog psychology.
Yeah, I'm at about the end of the time that I have. I think it's kind of concluded itself anyways. Yeah. And it feels like it's kind of wound itself.
End up repeating ourselves if we stay on any longer.
Yeah. So that was a good one, guys. I gotta go. I gotta get everybody fed.
Right. Well,
everybody first, and then we can talk about you feeding.
Oh yeah. I don't know how this ends. Producer Art needs to.
All right. Well, this is the origin story, how we all got started on dog psychology. And next episode is going to be how to get started in dog psychology, because that's how you ended it. So that's actually a good place to end, because that's how we're going to pick it up next week.
End everything the way you'd like it to begin.
That's correct. Awesome. See you guys next time. Have a good one.
See you guys.
Bye.